Chapter 2 Physics. Define matter. Any substance that occupies space and has mass. Matter may exist in what three states? Solid, liquid, and gas. Define kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is the energy of motion. Work is the product of what? Force and the distance moved. What are the parts of a lever? A rigid bar and a pivot point called a fulcrum. A wheelbarrow is an example of what class lever? A second-class lever. Are all three states of matter affected by thermal expansion? And if so, which state is affected most? All three states are affected, with gases being affected the most. What is a British thermal unit? The amount of heat energy required to change the temperature of 1 pound of water by 1 degree Fahrenheit. Name the three methods of heat transfer. Conduction, convection, and radiation. What term defines the temperature at which all molecular motion ceases? Absolute zero. Can liquids be compressed? No, liquids are generally considered incompressible. What are the customary units used to express hydraulic or pneumatic pressure in the United States? Pounds per square inch, or PSI. Describe how pressure is transmitted when a force is applied to a confined liquid. Pressure is transmitted equally in all directions. What formula expresses the relationship between force, pressure, and area? Force equals area times pressure, or FAP. What is the approximate speed of sound at sea level on a standard day? (661 knots, 761 miles per hour, or 340 meters per second? What is the atmospheric pressure at sea level on a standard day? (29.92 inches of mercury, 1013.2 millibars, or 14.7 psi. On a standard day at sea level, what is the value for temperature? 59 degrees Fahrenheit, or 15 degrees Celsius. What are the factors that determine density altitude? Temperature and atmospheric pressure. What is a term used to describe the ratio between the amount of moisture actually present in the atmosphere as compared to the amount the air could hold if it were completely saturated? Relative humidity. What are the four principal forces acting on an airplane in flight? Lift, drag, thrust, and gravity. What is the term that describes the angle between the relative wind and the chord line of an airfoil? The angle of attack. What are the factors that cause an airplane wing to stall? A stall is caused when the angle of attack exceeds a critical value and the airflow separates from the upper surface and becomes turbulent. What are the principal effects that result from lowering flaps while in flight? Lift increases, drag increases, and stall speed decreases. What is the function of a wing-mounted vortex generator? Vortex generators delay or prevent the airflow from separating from the upper surface of a wing during high-speed flight. How does blade flapping help to compensate for dissymmetry of lift in helicopter main rotor systems? Flapping increases the angle of attack and lift of the retreating blade and decreases the angle of attack and lift of the advancing blade. How does the airflow through the main rotor of a helicopter change during the transition from normal flight to auto rotation? During normal flight, the air moves downward. During auto rotation, the air moves upward. What is friction? The opposition to relative motion between two objects in contact with each other. When a fluid passes through the middle section of a venturi, what pressure and velocity changes occur? Pressure drops and velocity increases. Two gears with teeth on their outer edges act like what class of lever? A first class lever. What is meant by a resonant frequency of an aircraft structure? The frequency that produces the greatest amplitude of vibration in the structure. What is the purpose of stall strips on the leading edge of an airplane wing? Stall strips cause a disruption to the airflow as an angle of attack increases, causing the inboard section of the wing to stall before the outboard section of the wing. What is the longitudinal airspeed described as? Velocity. What are the different ways to measure temperature? Fahrenheit, Celsius, Kelvin, and Rankine. What is magnetism? Motion of an electric charge resulting in attractive and repulsive forces between objects. What is directional stability? The ability of an aircraft to avoid yawing. What is the imaginary line that runs from the leading edge to the trailing edge of an airfoil? Chord line. What is an auto-rotation? An auto-rotation is when the helicopter blades spin without engine power as air flows through the rotor. What are the three types of friction? Rolling, sliding, and static. Name the forms of energy that can be converted into heat energy. Mechanical, electrical, chemical, radiant, nuclear, and solar. What is potential energy? Energy that is stored and can be turned into kinetic energy. What are the three basic parts of a lever? The fulcrum, force of effort, and resistance. What does specific gravity mean? It is the ratio of a substance's density to the density of pure water. What is meant by the density of air? The mass of a given volume of air. What are two types of fluids? Liquids and gases. What is meant by pressure? A force that acts on a unit of area. What is the absolute humidity of the atmosphere? The actual amount of water that is in a given volume of air. What will happen to the pressure of a confined gas if the temperature of the gas is increased? The pressure will also increase. What determines the mechanical advantage of a gear train? The ratio between the number of teeth on the drive gear and the number of teeth on the driven gear. What determines the mechanical advantage of an arrangement of ropes and pulleys? The number of ropes that support the weight. What formula is used to find the amount of work done when an object is moved? Work equals force times distance. What is the Celsius equivalent of a temperature of 50 degrees Fahrenheit? 10 degrees Celsius. How many cubic inches of fluid is forced out of a cylinder by a piston whose area is 20 square inches when the piston moves 5 inches? 100 cubic inches. Give an example of a first class lever, a second class lever, and a third class lever. A first class lever could be a screwdriver being used to pry the lid from a can of paint. A second class lever could be a wheelbarrow. A third class lever could be a hydraulically retracted landing gear. How much force is produced by 1000 psi of hydraulic pressure acting on a piston whose area is 20 square inches? 20,000 pounds. What characteristic of the atmosphere determines the speed of sound? Temperature. What is meant by energy? The capacity for doing work. What causes ice to change into liquid water? The absorption of heat energy. What happens inside a solid material when it absorbs heat energy? The molecules within the material move faster. What is the basic unit of heat in the English system? The British thermal unit. How much work will one British thermal unit of heat energy perform? 778 foot-pounds of work. What is the basic unit of heat in the metric system? Calorie. How much heat energy is in a small calorie? The amount of heat energy that will raise the temperature of 1 gram of water 1 degree Celsius. How much heat energy is in a large calorie? The amount of heat energy that will raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water 1 degree Celsius. What is the first law of thermodynamics? Heat energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be changed in its form. What is the second law of thermodynamics? Heat energy can only flow from a body having a high temperature to a body having a low temperature. What is an example of heat transfer by conduction? Removal of heat from an engine cylinder by air flowing over its surface. What is an example of heat transfer by convection? The uniform heating of the air in a room by a floor heater. The heated air rises and forces the cooler air down so it can be heated by conduction. What is an example of heat transfer by radiation? The heating of the Earth's surface by heat transmitted through space from the sun. Why do most metals expand when they are heated? As heat is absorbed, the electrons move faster and expand their orbits in the molecules of the metal. What is Bernoulli's principle? Bernoulli's principle states that an increase in speed of a fluid results in a decrease in pressure of the same fluid. What is Newton's first law of motion? A body at rest remains at rest, and a body in motion will continue in a straight line unless acted on by a force. What effect does the increase in temperature of a confined gas have on its pressure? When the volume of a gas remains constant, an increase in its temperature increases its pressure. What effect does high humidity have on a piston engine performance? Water vapor is less dense than dry air, and thus high humidity decreases the density of the air. The less dense air decreases the energy performance. What is meant by relative wind with regard to an airfoil? The direction the wind strikes an airfoil. What is meant by the mean aerodynamic chord, or MAC? MAC is the average distance from the leading edge to the trailing edge of the wing. What is meant by the critical angle of attack? The highest angle of attack at which the air passes over the airfoil in a smooth flow. Above the critical angle of attack, the airflow breaks away and becomes turbulent. What is meant by the stagnation point of an airfoil? The point on the leading edge of an airfoil at which the airflow separates, some flowing over the top and some over the bottom. What is the difference between speed and velocity? Speed is the rate at which an object is moving. Velocity is the vector quantity that expresses both the rate and direction an object is moving. What is meant by weight? The measure of the force of gravity acting on a body. What is meant by thrust? The forward aerodynamic force produced by a propeller, fan, or turbojet engine as it forces a mass of air to the rear behind the airplane. What is meant by drag? The aerodynamic force acting in the same plane as the relative wind striking an airfoil. Drag acts in the direction opposite to that of thrust. What is meant by dissymmetry of lift produced by a helicopter rotor? The difference in lift between the two sides of the rotor disc when the helicopter is in forward flight. The side with the advancing blade produces the greater lift because the forward speed adds to the rotor speed. The side with the retreating blade produces less lift because the forward speed subtracts from the rotor speed. What is meant by a blade stall of a helicopter rotor? A condition of flight in which the retreating blade is operating at an angle of attack higher than will allow for the air to flow over its upper surface without turbulence. What is meant by translational lift in a helicopter? The additional lift produced by a helicopter rotor as the helicopter changes from hovering to forward flight. What is meant by ground effect in helicopter flight? An increase in lift when a helicopter is flying at an altitude of less than half the rotor span. This increase is produced by the effective increase in the angle of attack caused by the deflection of the downwashed air. What is meant by ground resonance in a helicopter? The destructive vibration that occurs when the helicopter touches down roughly and unevenly. The shock throws a load into the lead lag hinges of the rotor blades and causes them to oscillate about this hinge. If the frequency of this oscillation is the same as the resonant frequency of the fuselage, the energy will cause the helicopter to strike the ground hard with the opposite skid or wheel. If corrective action is not taken immediately, ground resonance can destroy the helicopter. What effect does an increase in density altitude have on engine performance? As density altitude increases, air density decreases and engine performance decreases. How do flaps allow an airplane to take off and land at slow airspeed? The extension of flaps increases the camber of the airfoil, causing greater lift and drag. Why do slots and slats delay the onset of a stall to a higher angle of attack? They allow the airflow to remain attached to the upper surface of the wing at higher angles of attack, reducing stall speed. What is the function of wing fences on the aircraft? Wing fences, or stall fences, delay the stall from reaching the ailerons, allowing improved aileron control at slower airspeeds. What is the relationship between temperature, density, weight, and volume? As temperature increases, density decreases and volume increases. As density decreases, the weight of a set volume also decreases. What effect does an increase in the volume of a gas have on its temperature if its pressure remains constant? As the volume of a gas increases with a constant pressure, the temperature decreases. What effect does an increase in the pressure of a confined gas have on its temperature? Increasing the pressure of a confined gas increases its temperature. What is the difference in the fluids used in a hydraulic system and those used in a pneumatic system? Fluid used in a hydraulic system is incompressible. Fluid used in a pneumatic system is compressible. What effect on density altitude is caused by an increase in air temperature? As the temperature increases, the air density decreases and the density altitude increases. Now we're here in the risk management portion. What risks are associated with aircraft operations at higher density altitudes? As density altitude increases, engine performance decreases and aircraft aerodynamic performance decreases. Explain the potential risks associated with a repair to a control surface. An incorrectly repaired control surface can begin to flutter during flight and separate from the aircraft. What are the risks of an individual creating their own performance and testing data? Performance and testing data are used by aircraft manufacturers to show that their products meet the regulations that they are being certified to. The certification criteria can be complex and specific to certain aircraft and components. It is dangerous for a certified mechanic or pilot to develop their own testing of a modification without consulting the FAA Aircraft Certification Office in their district. Describe the risks associated with confusing Celsius versus Fahrenheit, gallons versus liters, or pounds versus kilograms. Confusing English and metric units of measure can lead to misreading of performance charts, fueling an aircraft with less fuel than necessary, overloading an aircraft beyond maximum allowed weight, and many other dangers.